All right, we're back live streaming again. Okay, team, we've had clearance from our union rep that we can have had a sufficient break. Councillor McCann. Okay, team, we're going to welcome Brandy to the table, who is going to talk to the item on the agenda 8.3 around the climate change and the submission, and also we'll have Sophie Hanford as portfolio holder talk to the submission as well in terms of the work that Brandy and Sophie have done together to bring this to you today. I do want to note just before Brandy introduces the report that as chair of the committee, staff did come to me around the revised draft after Brandy worked with Sophie, and as chair I accepted that for this meeting, given the light workload on this meeting, and just asked that the revised copy was circulated out to elected members. So I hope you've checked your emails. If you haven't, we are working from the revised draft, and there is hard copies there in our effort to reduce our impact on the environment. So I'm sorry, just joking. And so I'm going to hand it over to Brandy, and then Brandy, if you want to hand it over to Councillor Hanford after that.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having me this morning. I'm actually quite quickly going to hand it right over to Sophie to introduce what we've done. Thank you.
Excellent. So Sophie, good as portfolio holder to be involved in this prior to coming to the council. So hopefully we can, with minor amendments or no amendments, move this. I'm going to hand it over to you, and just feel free to talk to the submission.
Cool. So again, thank you for allowing me to feed into this process and for passing it over for me to introduce the report today. So the report, as you can tell by the heading, brings our Kapiti Coast District Council submission to the Climate Change Commission's draft advice to the Strategy and Operations Committee. As noted in the report, we know that through the adoption of the Zero Carbon Act, the government has committed to reaching net zero emissions of long-lived gases by 2050 and to reducing biogenic methane emissions by between 24 and 47% also by 2050. So the Commission has been tasked with developing recommendations to achieve these targets, so that advice is going to government. It's particularly important also because the Commission's analysis currently shows, and this is demonstrated through the Commission's draft advice, that the country is not on track to meeting our 2050 targets. So a bit of background. So beginning on 1st of February, the Climate Change Commission has invited submissions, and submissions are now due by the 28th of March. The original due date was the 14th of March. So one of the reasons why we had to push this through pretty quickly. I understand that the pressure on staff has been immense as well to get this all finalised for today's meeting. So the full advice can be found on the Commission's website at 188 pages long. The Commission has received nearly 600 submissions so far, so this goes into that pool as one of ours from Council. So you can take the submission as there's some key kind of points in the submission that have been contributed by myself and Brandy drafting most of that. But also the submission says more than just what's directly included, because of that point in there that notes that for the responses to specific questions that are posed in the consultation document, that we support the submissions made by Greater Wellington Regional Council, Local Government New Zealand, and Taituara, formerly known as Solgum. So note that the draft submission takes into account all of that, so essentially says more than even just what we've put in there, and I personally support the submissions that have been drafted and made by those three organisations and groups. So I, as the portfolio holder, am very happy with the messages noted in the submission and the approach, and how it's been reworked a little to bring the key recommendations and points to the fore through using our own journey as an example of the challenges we face in going faster and harder, I guess, in our response to climate change. And also noting that there's a potential, I don't know if this has been added in the handout, that to add another recommendation which just formalises that there can be minor changes made by the CE in consultation with myself as the portfolio holder before this is submitted. One other quick thing to mention is that we have a Wellington Regional Climate Change Forum meeting tomorrow, and there's potential for us as a group to put in a submission if we choose to, the councillors represented on that group. And that will just summarise the key points from all of the council's submissions into one. And I would appreciate some guidance as to whether councillors feel this would need to come back to a full council meeting, or whether myself and Guru, as the representatives on that, as part of that forum, that working group, would be able to sign that off. So essentially, as the portfolio holder, I am happy with the draft submission and would encourage you all to also support the submission and the messages that it sends, and also acting as kind of one way that we can continue to give feedback and push for the things that will support us as a district to be able to make the changes that we need to be a part of the nationwide solutions to climate change.
Thanks very much for that, Sophie. And before I move on to His Worship the Mayor, for the multitude of people out there that are watching via Zoom, if you are looking at the document on the council website, I'm not sure it'll actually have the submission that we're referring to because of the late changes. So if anyone is watching and is interested, I'm sure you can contact the council for a copy of the updated submission that Councillor Hanford is talking about. So with that, I'm going to open it up. We're into question time. I will come to Zoom participants at the end of the questions from elected members in the chamber. So, Your Worship the Mayor.
Right. It's good. The redrafted submission looks much more robust. But I have one ongoing concern which I continuously refer to in other government legislation or direction to local government. This is the term used is the Commission's recommendations have not fully realized the opportunities available through the use of local government as implementation partner. The concept of an implementation partner has been used twice there in the bullet points. My continuing concern is an implementation partner can be like the other list of government legislation that comes from Parliament, is requiring us to do stuff, but there's no funding that follows with it. So is this another area where we are making a rod of our own back? We have to signal to them somehow that, yes, we are keen to do this, but it must be funded. I think that's important. Otherwise, it makes it difficult, because we know that in the cold face of local government politics, people who stand for election always say, I will lower the rates, I will lower the rates, I will lower the rates, without realizing that we've got this huge amount of stuff that we have got to do and we've got to increase the rates. So it will be useful to signal that somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think it's noted by Brandy. Any other elected members have any questions or any comments into the submission? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I just have a number of questions. The first one is, we make the statement in opening that we support, or probably the old version, that we support the recommendations overall. And it's a question that's been asked before at this time in submission processes. How does staff know that we support the recommendations overall? And I just ask that because personally I've got three real questions with the overall recommendations in the draft advice.
I think that's probably more of a question for Wayne. So
I'd probably come back to the fact that we declared a climate emergency means we acknowledge the importance of it, and therefore overall we say 100% we agree, and perhaps you're getting down to, but underneath that, are there some points of difference? That would be a different matter.
Thanks, Wayne. I think it's a pretty succinct response. And I'll come back to you in a sec, Councillor Elliott. And I think the reality is we generally agree in terms of the principles around the climate change emergency. There might be some of the finer details that we won't all agree with, but it probably comes back to that workshop that we did around the LTP about sort of coming to some consensus. And so from a consensus perspective, we're generally in agreement. But any further questions, Councillor Elliott?
Yep. I really like the submission from us. Are we going to get to see a copy of the LGNZ in Greater Wellington and Turutua Sorghum submissions that we are saying that we agree with?
Through you, Mr. Chair. we have seen the initial drafts, but they are still doing exactly what we're doing. They have yet to go to their council. So, and I think several of them, because the deadline has been extended to 28 March, they will, they're taking advantage of that time. So we could do something about circulating them once we have the final drafts or even final versions, just to make sure there were no concerns. I mean, we could hold this until the very last minute to submit it, if that makes you more comfortable.
Can I just add, I think I would imagine that they would email them out through their normal channels to elected members, like Soldium does, but also they will probably appear through the EMB if they don't come through email.
Just back to the our submission again. I just request that it actually refers to our Mayoral Task Force on Waste Minimisation and Management as an initiative that we brought in ourselves, particularly to address the biogenic methane emissions, because there are 4 project priorities in this report, and number 3, Kaitiaki was council to establish a food waste composting facility in the district, accompanied by a comprehensive education and engagement program focused on composting as an effective and accessible waste reduction strategy to complement the existing very successful Composting New Zealand green waste plant. And together aim to remove biogenic methane producing material from landfills. So I think that is worth adding, and would ask that be added. And also, if you're doing a list of recommendations in our submission that we would recommend other councils do, I would definitely like to have it in there that we recommend other councils have a mayoral forum to do the same aims as us. And I just want to mention the forum later as well. The forum, the task force, and the recommendations that were accepted by council on the 12th of December.
Thank you,
So I may have a
Councillor.
further recommendation as far as this goes.
I think we'll leave it to Brandy. She's been scribbling frantically as you've been talking, so she certainly noted down your feedback. If I could just draw our elected members to the recommendations, I will come back to see if there's any further questions. But I think the recommendations will need to read that to approve this submission as amended. I think it's appropriate given the revised submission. And then also there'd be a 20, which would be a copy of the resolution from the MPS on parking around delegating the chief executive and portfolio holder around minor editorial amendments. I think given the feedback from Councillor Elliott and others, that'll be taken through to the chief executive and the portfolio holder. So Councillor Elliott, did you have any further questions?
Not at the moment, but I will mention this now, and that is just that this report was accepted on the 12th of December 2019, and I would actually like to request a report back or a briefing from staff on progress in meeting the aims and objectives.
Can we take that offline then?
So,
I think just with your portfolio, we can take that offline. Not saying it's not important, but thank you for that. I'm just going to check with Zoom participants whether we've got any questions, Grayson, from anyone on Zoom. And any other elected members got any questions or comments on the submission? Or did Sophie and Brandy do a fantastic job? Looks like it. We've got, oh no, Councillor Holbrook doesn't think so.
No, I just wanted to talk all that actually. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to respond to Sophie's question around our approach to the Regional Climate Change Committee's submission. That would be a submission from that group, and as our delegated representatives on that group, I'm sure we'd all be happy for you to input into that as you see fit. And I'm seeing some nods around the table, so.
Thank you for that. And so no further questions. Would Councillor Henford like to move the recommendations? Oh, you have a question. No.
I only have a question because before we finish, I want to summarize what I think I've heard.
Absolutely. Okay. Yep. So I'm just going to hand it back to Brandy. Who's going to just summarise the feedback that she's heard. Then Councillor Henford's going to move the recommendations 19 and 20, which 20 is obviously not, it doesn't appear in the paper. If someone can just be ready to second that.
Thank you once again, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to summarize that I made sure that I've heard the changes you might like to see. So in regards to the issue of seeing council as an implementation partner, or the role that local government has, we want to emphasize that funding must come alongside that. Second, you want us to make reference to the mayoral task force on waste minimization and the work we've done to reduce biogenic emissions, and also suggest the Climate Change Commission consider a recommendation that other councils follow suit and do the same. And third, you want to make sure you'd like to see either through the EMB the other submissions that will go out before we send ours off as well. So that's what I think I heard. Is that correct?
A lot personal view, but I don't think we need to see the others before our submission goes out. I just think that the elected members would like to see them. Councillor McCann.
Just being very pedantic about the word should with the extra funding. I just would be worried that the submission might suggest, with the wording that you just mentioned there, that we won't do it unless we've got funding. I think the emphasis is that they should be funding, not that we will not continue our work.
Thank you, Councillor. So I don't see any further names, and just checking again, Zoom's nothing. No. So Councillor Hanford, would you like to move, as we've seen on the screen there, the amended and additional recommendations? Okay, thank you. And seconded by His Worship the Mayor. So right of introduction.
Just thanking the staff for the production of this submission, and also for the opportunity to feed in before today, and also thank you to fellow councillors for putting your trust in Guru and myself to represent our council at the Climate Change Regional Forum, and for, again, trusting me to feed into this, and hopefully accepting the submission today to go to the Commission, and hopefully it's taken really seriously alongside the other council submissions when they process the submissions.
Thank you. And just before I move to Councillor Compton, can I just check a procedural, but in terms of the submission, is there an opportunity to be heard? And if so, have we, and that's sorry if it's included, but thank you. And so Councillor Compton.
Thank you. I want to thank staff and Councillor Hanford for their work on, expanding out the submission, and especially for the expanded section on commuter rail. As I like to say on Twitter, let's choo-choo this.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Elliott.
Look, thank you, Brandy and Sophie, for your work on this. It's been really good. And look, I would just like to encourage every councillor here who really cares about emissions and what we can do to actually make your own personal submission. That submission period got extended through the request of industry stakeholders right up until the 28th of March. So we've got an extra 2 weeks. We've actually got time. Personally, I've got a couple of issues that for my personal submission. I'm concerned about the future around natural gas use, and I'm concerned around the way the rural industry are carrying more than their fair share of the weight of responsibility to change compared to the urban. I just think they're being picked on all over again, and there are good reasons why they shouldn't. So definitely please do your own submissions. This one's like so super important for our future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I just really wanted to thank the staff and Councillor Hanford, but also acknowledge that how the portfolio system allows us to have a councillor who takes this on board, and that we can put our trust in that councillor and work together through that way of working, which I think is very conducive to coming to a conclusion that we all agree. So I really want to tautoko the work that Sophie is doing in the way that she helps lead this, not only in our council but throughout New Zealand.
Tautoko that. That's great. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Halliday.
Actually, just want to endorse what Rob's just said, but I just wanted to add that there's a lot of really good positive work going on in this space by yourself, Brandy, and by yourself, Sophie, and you, Mr. Mayor. But just taking into consideration that and acknowledge Sophie's profile on a national perspective with regards to this space. I think it's very, very important that we get this right, and it's very, very important that we are seen to be leading, I guess, in this space because of that profile. I think we will be under the microscope a little bit with regards to this ongoing. I envision that Councillor Hanford will be very prevalent in this space in the years to come, and it will be very, very interesting to see how we lead in this as well. But I just want to thank you for the work that you're putting into this. This is fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor. I can't see any other names on the screen. I'm just checking in terms of Zoom. No. So we're going to move to put that to the vote. So right of reply.
I would just echo what Councillor Elliott has said in encouraging you all to make your own individual submissions. Also noting that I have sent out a submission template that you're all welcome to use that I've helped put together alongside 10 other climate and environmental based organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand, mainly youth organisations including Te Ara Whatu, an incredible Indigenous group of young people doing some awesome work in the space in the Pacific Climate Warriors, and we know that their voices are really important in this corridor. So just wanting to acknowledge them and also acknowledge that I have sent to councillors a template that you're all welcome to use, and also to members of the public as well. You can find that template and encourage everyone, councillors and our whole entire community, to everyone who might be watching online, to also make your own personal submission.
Thanks, Sophie. And I'm sure if anyone needs that template, just to contact Councillor Hanford if you haven't received one or want one. So recommendations again on page 88 of the report, amended. Moved by Councillor Hanford, seconded by His Worship the Mayor. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that is carried. Good work, team, and thanks very much, Brandy. Good to see you again. So, team, we're now moving to page, the recommendations is on page 94 for the confirmation of minutes from the 18th of February, with the attachment there of the minutes. Is there anything that you've been attributed to you that you didn't say or do? If not, if an elected member can move. Councillor Compton's moved. Councillor Buswell seconded the minutes. Any further discussion? I'm going to put those to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. Item 10 on the agenda is public speaking time. There is none that I'm aware of, and there's also no confirmation of publicly excluded minutes. And so I'm going to call the meeting to a close, and thank you for everyone attending and for staff's input into the meeting. Thank you.